So morality is a big topic. It's very controversial. We have a lot of definitions and other ways to discuss this, but I'm going to start with something very, very basic, and I want to tie this to our lives in our real world. So I'm going to present some scenarios to you. Before I present you with some scenarios, I do want your participation. So I will ask you to discuss things with me. I know that it's not everybody's choice to interact with the instructor. That's completely okay. I would encourage you to, and I hope that you'll feel comfortable with me. I don't judge anybody. I value your opinions. But I know that some people prefer to just interact in a different way. Therefore, I would urge you to, if you don't want to participate vocally, let's just close this for a second and go here, is that we'll have a Mentimeter. And in the Mentimeter, first I'll ask you to vote, and then you'll have an opportunity to also, yeah, it's opening. Yeah. And you'll have an opportunity also to write in open-ended questions to write your answer. So I'll ask you to go scan this barcode or go on menti.com and then use that code. So open this on your mobiles, on your laptops. So at the very least, what I ask is that for you to participate, for you to engage with our topics, for you to think about what's happening in class through these questionnaires. But as you see the discussion unfold, as you see if there's something interesting that's happening in class, there's a perspective that you want to share, I'm very happy to hear from you. If you're going to just hear me blah, blah for 2 hours, that's going to be very boring, both for you and for me. And I think having a good discussion between students is very important for you to feel like you're included, that you're heard. And in topics like morality, there is no right or wrong. There's lots of things, lots of perspective that we can bring in and discuss with one another. So I'm going to present you with 3 different scenarios. And I want you to imagine as if you're in that scenario. And this is going to be a life or death kind of scenario. So I want you to imagine as if you're that person in that situation. Think very carefully about all the details in that scenario and think, what would you do? What would other people, your classmates, what would they do? What would the average person do in this kind of situation? What are the trade-offs? Are there some good trade-offs? Is there something that's completely right to do? Is there something that's completely wrong to do? Right? So as you're thinking about this, try and quantify things in your mind. Put the scientist hat on. Try to think about this from a scientific perspective and put yourself in the shoes of the person in that situation and try and make a decision. And then I'll ask you, what is your decision? And then I'll ask you, what do you think most people would do? Share a little bit about the considerations for this or for that, okay? So the first one is that, will you save the man? Who is the man? This is the man. His name is Wesley, and he's a construction worker. He also happens to be a Navy veteran. So he served in the Navy in the US, so he has some combat military experience, and he was relatively unknown to most of the people, but in this scenario, he was facing a certain situation, and the way that he dealt with the situation got him the title of the New York subway hero. Subway is in metro, underground, like the MTR. Yeah, so the New York has some, a very extensive network, and then unlike in Hong Kong, I guess, on the way to China, to Lowu, you've got one that doesn't have any shield, but in this case, the New York one does not have a shield that prevents people from falling into the track. So he was facing a situation where he saw a person falling into the track. So listen very, very carefully to the way that this is reported. Listen to all the details. Think about the situation and what he did and what you would do in this situation, okay? All right, so here we go.
On the New York City subway, it's hard enough finding someone who will give up his seat to a stranger, let alone be willing to give up his life for one.
The train was coming in like that.
It happened just 50-year-old Wesley Autry, a construction worker and Navy veteran, was standing on a subway platform with his 2 little girls when right in front of them, a man started having a seizure.
He kind of stumbled and over his own feet and fall backwards. I see a train coming, but the train is so close, I'm like, what do I do?
Wesley jumped onto the tracks and thought if he could just lie on top of the man, keep him from flailing, maybe the train would roll right over both of them. The clearance was exactly 21 inches. Wesley and the man, 20 and a half.
No way the train can stop before this gentleman could get him up off the tracks. So he covered him with his body and pushed him down to a point where the train wouldn't hit his head and held him down under the tracks while the train came and rolled right over the top.
It gave Wesley's children the scare of their young lives.
I thought he was going to get killed.
And Wesley, the scare of his too.
I'm like talking to him, sir, you can't move. I got 2 kids up here looking for the father to come back. I don't know you, you don't know me, but listen, don't panic. You know, I'm here to save you.
As for the guy Wesley saved, he's 20-year-old Cameron Hollipter, an other than a few scrapes and bruises, his father says he's doing fine.
Mr. Autry's instinctive and unselfish act saved our son's life.
You know, the word hero gets thrown around a lot nowadays.
What a better way to say it to start off the new year than to save a life.
Nice to be reminded of what one really looks like.
This is a guy I've been knowing
Steve
for
Hartman.
years.
Nice to be reminded of what a real hero looks like. So what do you think about this situation? What makes him a hero? What is it about this situation that warrants calling this person a hero? What did you see? What kind of details stood up for you?
The courage he has.
Courage, yeah. Can you say a little bit more about that? Why do you need courage in this kind of situation?
You know, it's like life that. So if you cover the man, that you probably get injured in that situation.
Yeah, the risk, the possibility of getting hurt yourself, right? In order to save another person, right? So why would somebody do something like this? What's the consideration? Why would he consider doing this? Why put yourself at risk for another person?
Is it because his background, like his from the Navy?
Okay. So what does that mean? If somebody comes from a Navy background, what does that mean to you?
So he has a certain mindset to save people.
Yeah. A life of service, in service of others, to protect others, right? The Navy goes out in order to protect people at home, something like that. And if you see somebody in danger, then put yourself in danger in order to help another person, right? Do you feel like it's his obligation or his choice in order to jump in and save? Does any Navy person have to jump in and save a person in this situation?
Or not really. I guess it's his choice.
There is a choice, right? So maybe he has better training than you and I, right? But it does require a certain person in order to make the choice to put yourself at risk, because he's not in Navy anymore, right? He served his time, right? Yes, thank you very much for that. To answer, what would you answer? Will you save the person, not save the person? So it seems like we all have an intuition of what we should do in this kind of situation. But there are risks, right? So you want to save the person is going to die if nobody intervenes. He cannot help himself, he's going to die because the train is coming. But then maybe some of us are not as well trained as the Navy person, maybe you don't have the instinct, and there's a real possibility of us getting hurt, right? So what would most people do in this situation? What is the right thing to do? Call. Yeah, there's a little bit of an urgency here, right? Because the train is coming. Perhaps if you take the time to call somebody else, you might lose the life, right? Yeah. So you need to really have an instinct in order to decide what is the right thing to do. Do you have enough time to call somebody else? Will they be able to do this? If you call them, will they jump? So let's say you see something like this on the NTR on the way to Lowell. Do you think the NTR person will jump in and save the person saying the train is coming? Is this something that we can ask of another person? Your own life, yeah. The other person's life. Okay, good. So we all already have like two sides. Is there another side to this? Your life versus the other person's life. What else is there? Who else was in this scenario? True. There were children there, right? What about these children? This is a father. So it's not only his life, but his life has dependencies with a lot of people around him, right? So what happens if he loses his life? We don't know what's going to happen with the kids. And because he jumped, obviously the kids are in trauma for the rest of their lives about their dad just like jumping in front of them. This ended up well for the father and the person he saved, but this could have ended very, very differently, right? So the difference between 21 inch and 20 and a half is very, very small. And the person did not know this jumping in. Did not know he has enough space, right? Nobody knows how high the train is and how high they're going to be. So there's also a measure of risk and uncertainty and time pressure. We don't have enough time. We need to make a decision very, very fast. And he's even aware of his kids. He's saying to the person, please don't move. You trust me, I trust you. The kids need their father, so don't move, right? So when you get into this kind of situation, do you just think about yourself versus the other person, or do you take into consideration your family and the other people around? Who is going to be affected by your decisions, right? So there's lots of different factors that we need to look into when we make this kind of decision. Maybe if we're from the Navy, we have some instinct because we were well trained. We're told, if somebody is at risk, you go and you risk your life, right? It's not, so maybe he was operating based on instinct. But if it's all of us, we really need to ask ourselves, what would we do in this kind of situation? So if we look at what it is that you answered, so I think most of the people, so 24, say, no, I wouldn't. And I completely understand the people who say, we're not sure, we don't know. It's a little bit difficult to know what to do in this situation. So just show you some of the considerations that people wrote about, what they would do or wouldn't do. So, for example, somebody says, I don't know who this person is. Maybe the person is evil. It doesn't deserve to be rescued. I don't know. But for me to risk my life for somebody, maybe I need to know somebody about who this person is. I really empathize and see myself in this frozen in shock. So I've been in some situations in my life where I had similar dilemmas, not this extreme, but something else. That had the flavor of this, and I was frozen in shock. It's very difficult to act in these kinds of situations because you really don't know what to do, and you also have a sense of, even if you can't think, you have a sense of self-preservation. Like you want to protect yourself or your loved ones first. You don't know. You have a sense of risk, uncertainty, whether you can really save the person. So there's lots of factors over there. Yeah. So if the children are there, this is a big dilemma. Plus the kind of trauma that you're exposing them to. So a lot of things to consider. So I really appreciate you sharing, interacting, and thinking about this together with me. Anything else you want to say about this situation? Something else you feel like sharing? Yeah? Interesting? Kind of makes you think about life, right? About all kinds of dilemmas. So I'm going to show you another scenario. This scenario is closer to us. It's from our region. And the next question is, will you save the baby? So lots of saving to do today. This one, Wang Yue. Have you heard of this case study? Who heard of Wang Yue? You have? Yeah? You have? Okay, good. May I ask what you heard?
Oh, I saw it on the internet, and then the girl just ran into the road.
Yeah.
And then there's a truck that's going to hit the baby.
Right.
Yeah.
So what did you hear about this? The kind of reactions that you saw online? What did you hear about it?
Because it's quite in the 2011, so it's I cannot remember it correctly, but I guess it's most of the comments are negative.
The comments are negative.
Yeah.
About which part?
I cannot remember.
Okay, something about the situation is very negative. Yeah, good, thank you. Do you have any memory of what happened then?
But just about considering that the internet, I mean, the netizen just criticize the people that pedestrian, they are cruel, they don't want to have the babies, and whatever.
Yeah, too many people ignored a baby just lying there. It's very good. So I'll show you. Is that what you meant? Yeah, okay, good. So I'll remind you what the scenario is and some of the reactions over there. And once again, I want you to put yourself in this kind of situation. You're facing that baby lying there, being hit by a car, truck, right? Will you save the baby? What does it require of you to save the baby? Who is involved? What kind of uncertainty? What kind of risk? How do you judge people who have help or not help, right? So it's very interesting dilemma. It's another level to this kind of interference, this kind of saving somebody's lives.
A security camera in this bustling hardware market caught the accidents on tape. The footage shows a little girl wandering in front of a white van. She's hit, run over, and run over again by another vehicle. The video was posted online, outraging the public. But these are the scenes that sparked nationwide soul-searching. Over a dozen pedestrians, motorists, and bikers pass by the bleeding child and do nothing.
The hit-and-run accidents happened here in an alleyway near Wang's father's hardware store. She lay on the ground for about 10 minutes before a good Samaritan moved her here to safety.
Chen Shanmei was that unexpected hero, a street scavenger who stepped in to save a life, now a symbol of understated decency, a quality many fear is increasingly rare in a nation obsessed with moving up the economic ladder. I didn't think of anything at the time, she told local reporters. I just wanted to save the girl. Chen's neighbors told us she appeared overwhelmed by her instant celebrity and has since gone home to the countryside. Granny Chen represents the best part of human nature, Chu says. I thank her for that.
Wang Yue is still very much in critical condition. Her mother says that she has some sensation in her lower body, but she has very little brain activity.
Despite the concerns of China's declining morality, here at the hospital, humanity shines. During our short visit, Wang's family received a steady procession of well-wishers, bearing gifts, money, and comfort for someone they never knew. Wang's mother appreciates the support, but is hoping to receive the best gift of all. Don't give up on Mom, she tells her girl. Mom is not giving up. Let Mom have one more chance to love and spoil you. Eunice Yoon, CNN, Guangzhou.
Yeah, interesting. Another case study. Yeah. And once again, I'll ask you to share with me, will you save the baby? So what did you see here? What's new about this one compared to the previous one? What considerations do we have on whether to save the baby or not?
We got more safer about it.
Sorry?
We got more safer about it that, you won't take risk of your life.
Yeah, she was also called a hero, but she did not risk her life, right? Yeah. So there was no sense of putting your life at risk in order to save another person. So it seems almost like an easier decision than the previous one. But we still saw some people who did not react to this. What would be a good reason not to react to a baby lying down? in the middle of the road.
Might be mistaken that you have some responsibility when you do something. You do that, you need to be responsible to the little girl here.
So if you intervene, it's as if you're taking responsibility over the situations, and you might be accountable in some way. You're risking somebody holding you accountable for the result. So maybe they will die and you will be blamed in some way. Is that what you meant? Yeah. Okay. So you think this is what drove the people who ignored? They were scared of the responsibility?
They want to bear the trouble of doing the helping because you need to get the girl to the hospital and then you need to do a lot of things.
Yeah, they're busy people. You know, they have some stuff on their schedule that day. Why take the time in order to save that little girl? So we have this consideration, this trade-off, my time, my schedule versus a girl's life. So we weigh this. I just wanted to ask you whether some of you took Introduction to Psychology, Introduction to Social Psychology. Is there any classic finding or classic case in social psychology that sounds a little bit like this? Does this ring familiar?
Is it like bystander effect?
Bystander effect? You wanted to say something?
Yeah, because like you feel less responsible when there's so many people around versus when you're the only person there and you feel like you have to do something, other than just waiting for somebody else to do it.
Right. So we're going to talk about a very famous case study of Kitty Genovese in the 1960s that started a whole line of research in social psychology about the bystander effect.
Was it an apartment and then the girl screaming and then nobody was like called the police?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to do some misinformation debunking about this case study. So I'm already giving you a teaser that the case study did not unfold exactly the way that you studied it. But I will say that this is a very famous case study because people felt like New Yorkers don't help strangers. When people call out for help, people ignore that. I have to say, I don't know what happened with Kitty Genovese, but I visit New York quite often, including this year. The subway is a disaster. I don't know if you ever got to experience the New York City subway. I see a lot of people suffering and a lot of people in pain, a lot of people going through some mental breakdown and drugs, and a lot of people are not helping. Sometimes if you help, you put yourself in a situation where you feel like you're responsible or you might even get hurt by the person who is acting irrationally. So it's a big question, and we'll have we'll deal with this question about differences between Hong Kong and China, but all sorts of things regarding morality, but it's not clear what the differences are between society or what causes these differences. So, for example, in the earlier session and in previous years, some people raised, some people from men in China, I don't know exactly what's happening, but they said there's lots of scams about people who will get you to intervene and then hold you accountable for something and then scam you, extort you in some way to get money out of you. So there's all sorts of context, things about morality, where thinking about a person in that situation is a little bit difficult. Thinking about what you would do, predicting what you would do is a little bit difficult. So we can have a look and see what 33 students said in this situation. So by far, we shifted to yes, I would from the previous one, which was too much of a risk, right? Not sure 5, there's not a single person saying, no, I wouldn't. So it's very interesting for us to think about what would happen in this kind of situation. And here we have like 11 different responses about why people said, so there's much less cost. So the cost is lower, the risk is lower, less dangerous, and so forth. At the very least, you could say, I would just call the authorities, right? It's very simple to call the authorities and say, something is happening here. But we'll come back to the bystander effect and Kitty Genovese and what happens when we see other people around us and when we think it's not for us to intervene. So very interesting 2 case studies. And I had videos to show you about something that happened. Now we're going to take this into another level. And this is now not a video, but this is a classic moral philosophy dilemma. This was something envisioned by a moral philosopher that you'll get to know by the name of Peter Singer. And he posed this dilemma to us, to all of us. And this became very, very famous because this started an entire movement. And the question is like this. So let's say that you're here in Hong Kong and you're on the way to a very important interview. For that interview, you wore your best suit. That suit is about $1,000 US. Imagine that you spend that much on a suit. And you're walking by the harbor and you see that a little girl fell into the harbor and she is about to drown. Now, I know some people know how to swim, some people don't. Assume that you know how to swim. And swimming is not a problem. The question is, would you jump into the harbor, thereby ruining your suit and giving up the interview? This is the dilemma that I have for you. So if we go back to the Mentimeter, I'll give you a chance to think about this for a second. The question is, will you save the little girl? So think about this for a second. Yes, save the little girl. No, don't save the little girl. Now, think about all the costs and all the things that are in this scenario and what the difference is from the previous 2 scenarios. So take a moment, think about this. Okay, good. So we have quite a few answers. Let's start with the differences. What's different about this scenario? What differentiates this from the other two scenarios?
He added on some material goods and then compare it to the line.
Right. So here the dilemma is whether you're going to win a suit that's worth $1,000 and maybe a job opportunity, a job interview, right? Compare it to a life, right? So when we think about this dilemma, we've got $1,000 in a job interview compared to a girl's life. Before, maybe we had people's schedules, so the stuff that they had to do during the day, right? So we have this dilemma, but now it's a little bit more clear because we have a monetary, we have a sum of money, right? So what's your take on this? $1,000 versus a person's life. What's your reaction? What would most people say in this situation? What are some of the complexities? Any thoughts?
Well, maybe your future job, like
future job, yeah.
And it's sustainable, but then saving the company also get you something.
What is this something else?
It feels like a very, very good reason.
A lifesaver job.
Be late for
You become a hero.
You become a hero. Many interviews to come, right? Right. So maybe there's something in saving the little girl that is not only for the little girl, maybe there's a little bit something selfish for you as well, right? Maybe a better future career, more opportunities, become a celebrity, right? Become another Granny Chan kind of thing. Yeah. So there's all these kinds of things to think about, right? But I guess people do make these kind of thoughts. First, the money. Second of all, I worked hard for this interview. It's not easy to get into JP Morgan, whatever. Yeah, interesting. Thanks for that. Anything else comes to mind? Steve?
Where's the joy of saving versus joy of not doing anything?
Yeah. On one side, you've got the joy of saving it. What happens if you don't save the girl? If you don't jump in, how would you feel? Guilty for the rest of your life. It's not just the baby's life, but it's also in a way also your life and how you would feel about this, right? A lifelong of guilt or a lifelong of perhaps joy or recognition, celebrity status, right? All these different factors that are in there. So do we want to save the girl? What would most people say here? 35 students, what would 35 students say? Yeah, save the girl, only 3. 3, I like the honesty, saying no. And I would like to know what the considerations are for that. There's no need to judge or criticize, but it's really interesting. There's always some people who would say no to this. So it's very interesting for us to try and understand what the no is about. We have some assumptions. We think, oh, we know why they say no. But sometimes we don't know, and we need to understand people's considerations. And I completely sympathize with not sure. I would like to think that I'm the kind of person who would jump in and save somebody, but I'm not always sure that I'll be up for the task. So we'll see. So now that you've had these 3 scenarios, especially the last one, where do you think this is going? So why am I giving you these scenarios? Why are we discussing this? There has to be a catch, right? It's leading somewhere. So now you put your scientist hat, and you're thinking, okay, so we've had these 3 scenarios. We talked about morality. We all understood that we want to save 1 year. A majority would say 1 year. A majority said that they will jump, or at least not sure, in order to save this army girl. So where is this leading? What's the catch here? Why would a moral philosopher in the 1970s pose this? Why did this become so famous? What does your gut feeling tell you about this? What is the catch here? Is there a catch?
Yes, people want to know the individual differences.
Individual differences?
Yeah, on the different moral situation.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of individual differences can impact this?
Your life value, that can impact your choice under different situations, and then kind of know what people think.
Yeah. So what's a value, for example, that would increase the chance to jump or decrease? Can you think of some values that would affect this or individual differences, traits?
Like, for example, this situation, some people will value their job or the money, so they value the most. But the other people, maybe they will value their life.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Some people might be a bit more selfish. Some people are a bit more pro-social. Some people put more emphasis on people's lives. Some people put more emphasis on something else, like their career and their money. So that is definitely an interesting thing here. And it gets a little bit closer to some of the other topics that we'll discuss. But this is not what this catch is about. So why did this become very, very famous? Because if we agree here that we should all be doing something, then Peter Singer has something to ask us. So what is the point? The point is this. So I'll just read this out together with you. So if you're like most people, you're probably saying to yourself right now, I wouldn't have walked past that child, in this case, 1 year. I would have stopped to help. Perhaps you would have, but remember that as we have already seen, 5.4 million children under 5 years old died in 2017, with a majority of those deaths being from preventable or treatable causes. So there's lots of children that are dying right now in front of us, not here physically, but around the world, that need our help. And we are not jumping into the harbor in order to save them. So he's giving this case study. Here's just one case described by a man in Ghana to a researcher from the World Bank. Take the death of this small boy this morning, for example. The boy died of measles. We all know he could have been cured at the hospital, but the parents had no money, and so the boy died a slow and painful death, not of measles, but out of poverty. So it is easy for us to say, okay, this girl is in front of us, I'm the only person responsible, I'm going to go in and jump in. I feel like I'm required to help. I need to help for the sake of the baby and also for my sake, for my mental sanity, for the joy I might get, or in order to avoid the guilt for the rest of my life. But I don't feel guilt when I ignore all the 5.7 million people. I don't feel joy when I contribute to charity in order to help them. There's so many people out there in the world suffering, dying every day, and I don't feel anything on it. I don't even bother myself with it. And it's not something that I contemplate very often. I need people like Peter Singer in order to help me, remind me there's other people in the world outside of Hong Kong, in places that are less fortunate than mine, right? Where people are not helped in the street, where people are dying every day. That's regular life, right? So let's say, for example, if I give you this dilemma, would you donate right now instead of ruining a suit of $1,000? How many of you would open right now your wallets and say, we're going to donate $1,000 in order to send this to save a girl in South America? So Peter Singer makes the comparison between these two scenarios. I have to say, the first time that I saw these two scenarios, I had a very strong gut intuition objection to this. It's not the same. Different scenario. You cannot blame me for 5.7 million kids. This is not my responsibility. It's far away from me. I'm not responsible. I had a lot of objections. But the more and more I thought about this, trying to quantify and understand from a scientific mindset, as a social psychologist, as a person, what are the differences between these two? I want us to think about what differentiates the first girl from the second girl. So what's the difference between this scenario and the second scenario? So what comes to mind? Why do we object to this comparison between these two things? Why does the one tell us that we must jump in and help? Doesn't matter if it's $1,000, whereas here, we don't open our wallets in order to give $1,000 to help. What's the difference between these two? Is there a difference? Do we have a moral obligation to help all these starving children? People who can be treated with medicine to avoid death from preventable diseases? So what are your thoughts when you see this kind of comparison? What comes to mind?
Just like a cold figure. I don't know, but it just gives you a sense of helplessness. You couldn't help any of them, or it doesn't really matter, or maybe you just pay 1,000 and you just save one of them. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't. But if you see a girl with who is struggling on the river, it is alive. It is a life which is struggling in front of you. It gives you a sense of, oh yeah, it is. Yeah, I have to help. It is the kind of obligation. You have to help it. You have to.
Yeah. So how would you define this difference? So you describe a few things, right? One is more real to you, in front of you. One is a little bit far away, right? In one case, it's the one girl. In the other case, it's a big number that you can't quantify, right? These kind of things. Which aspect is the most
distance?
The distance between you and the person. You can't see them in front of you, right? So you think if we would be based in South America, next to this little girl, perhaps next to this place, perhaps we would feel more obligated to help? Could be? Yeah, good. So distance, the number of people affected. You also mentioned my ability to help. Can I really help? Let's say I give $1,000. What does that help? What does that do? I save this one girl, but then all the other girls are going to die. So a feeling of helplessness. It's a very good keyword here. So we want to quantify these kind of things. So as a social psychologist, as a scientist, I want to help understand how do people compare these two scenarios. I want to see what the differences are. And I want to try and think, is there a way for me with a charity or as a scientist, as a researcher, as an instructor, to help people make the two more equivalent so that they will help? Because maybe I cannot save the 5.7, but there's billions of people in the world. If some of them would give some money, perhaps we could save all these children, right? So by all of us saying no, nobody can do anything. But some of us saying yes, a large enough proportion, we can save all of them. What other factors are you thinking about that make this less comparable? What other things are bothering you about this comparison between these two?
I think the difference is when people are actually making a bold decision, they don't do this expression of it. It's most likely the emotional response. But when you're reading saying this article, you're thinking about this logically, rationally, right? So you get very different conclusions, or
Yeah, very good point. A lot of the moral decisions we base on our gut instinct, our emotions. How do we emotionally react to this, right? So why is it that we react more emotionally to the first one and not so emotional to the second one? What makes the emotional difference between these two?
I'd say it's just the concept of like a moral circle. So things that are close to you, like for example, some people cares a lot about what's happening in Gaza, and some people don't. Like even in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So and it really has to do with what it's closer to the center of their moral circle. So
yeah, different people seeing their moral circle. I mean, do it differently. Some people really care about their close ones, their family, their immediate family, their friends. Some people care about all people. Some people even care beyond people. So now there's a group of people who are saying we need to care not about just the people who live today, but also need to care about all the people that will live for eternity after us. So we can't just ask or look at the considerations of people right now. We also need to look at all the future generations, and that's a lot more people than people who are alive today. Right? Some people are saying we're going to meet some of these people. It's not just about people. You've got animals out there. You've got nature out there. They all need to be protected. They don't have a voice. Somebody needs to stand. So moral circle, we'll come back to moral circle many, many times in this course. We discuss what is in our moral circle. How do we decide? Why do we differentiate between different groups? How do we make these kinds of distinctions? Very good. Thank you for that. Okay. So many considerations and many things that we need to think about. And there is a big difference between how we act emotionally and how we act when we think about things rationally. So what Peter Singer is trying to help us do is try to think about this from a rational perspective. Sit down and think with yourself. Now you have the opportunity. You're sitting in an advanced social psychology class. You now have the opportunity to think about things rationally with me. Later on, perhaps in your careers, you'll be able to do this from a perspective of a decision maker, a policy maker, somebody who has influence over others. So perhaps it's worthwhile to take the time to consider things rationally. This is the time for us to do these kinds of things. And especially as scientists, we want to try and understand why do sometimes people act emotionally and why do sometimes people act irrationally. Right. So I just want to summarize this section. We'll take a little bit of a break. This is a classic social psychology experiment. In this case, we'll call this experimental philosophy experiment. So there's a group, they call themselves the X-Files, experimental philosophers. So the X-Files typically do these kinds of things. We call this repeated measures design or within subject design. Within subject design, you, the participants, see both scenarios. And then we see a big shift between those when we manipulate it just like one factor, whether the girl is just in front of you, next to you, or far away in South America. But the factors are very similar. The cost is the same, $1,000 versus a life. So we run a lot of these social psychology experiments. You're going to run one of these social psychology experiments together with me. First time we did this was last semester. So I'm going to crowdsource you to come up with different hypotheses. Last semester, we had 90 different hypotheses. And I used my research funding in order to test your hypotheses. We came up with some amazing conclusions about how people think about charity and how people think about altruism and helping. So this is going to be one of the tasks that you'll need to do in class. But this is a classic scenario that we do in social psychology and experimental philosophy in order to try and understand how do people react to different situations, right? So I'll give you a 5-minute break, go refresh, and then we'll come back and we'll meet Peter Singer. 5 minutes. So this is Peter Singer, but a leading philosopher that changed a lot of things. This year came a revised version of his very famous book called Animal Liberation, about animal welfare. So he's also a vegan and calls for not eating animals, I guess. So he did a lot of moral philosophy about many, many topics. Two of his relevant to the topic that we just talked about, two of his very famous books are these, The Most Good That You Can Do and The Life That You Can Save. And it's available for free. So the effective altruism movement that came out of his books now gives away these books for free. And I strongly encourage you to go and read those. I listen to those as an audiobook. It's available for free. And it's inspiring and thought-provoking in many different ways. Even if you don't agree with his views, he writes this as a moral philosopher, and he gets you to think about all sorts of different things. I just want to tell you about Peter Singer and his influence. He also has a really nice podcast about how to live the best life that you can live in helping others and having an impact on society. But he's very influential both as an academic, as a scholar, and as a person, more generally in society. So here you can see at least about his scholarly achievements. Unlike many scholars, so we're just happy if we have a paper published and we don't really think about our impact in the world. Peter Singer really cares about impacting the world. And thanks to him and a group of enthusiastic young students like yourself, this became a big movement. And that's the movement I want to introduce you to show you that students can do amazing things if they're based on principles like the ones like Peter Singer's. So I'm going to show you a video of Peter Singer. This is a TED Talk where he talks about first this dilemma about 1 UN and whether we should save the drowning girl or not. But also telling the inspirational stories of 3-4 young people and how they turned these principles into real things that they can do in their lives. So they started charities and they started to do some good in the world. Some of them became big movements that handle billions of dollars in order to save millions of people around the world. So this is from Peter Singer.
There were other people who walked past Wang Yu, and a second van ran over her legs before a street cleaner raised the alarm. She was rushed to hospital, but it was too late. She died. I wonder how many of you, looking at that, said to yourselves just now, I would not have done that. I would have stopped to help. Raise your hands if that thought occurred to you. As I thought, that's most of you. And I believe you, I'm sure you're right. But before you give yourself too much credit, look at this. UNICEF reports that in 2011, 6.9 million children under 5 died from preventable poverty-related diseases. UNICEF thinks that that's good news because the figure has been steadily coming down from 12 million in 1990. And that is good. But still, 6.9 million is 19,000 children dying every day. Does it really matter that we're not walking past them in the street? Does it really matter that they're far away? I don't think it does make a morally relevant difference. The fact that they're not right in front of us, the fact, of course, that they're of a different nationality or race, none of that seems morally relevant to me. What is really important is, can we reduce that death toll? Can we save some of those 19,000 children dying every day? And the answer is, yes, we can. Each of us spends money on things that we do not really need. You can think what your own habit is, whether it's a new car, a vacation, or just something like buying bottled water when the water that comes out of the tap is perfectly safe to drink. You could take the money you're spending on those unnecessary things and give it to this organization, the Against Malaria Foundation, which would take the money you had given and use it to buy nets like this one to protect children like this one. And we know reliably that if we provide nets, they're used and they reduce the number of children dying from malaria, just one of the many preventable diseases that are responsible for some of those 19,000 children dying every day. Fortunately, more and more people are understanding this idea, and the result is a growing movement, effective altruism. It's important because it combines both the heart and the head. The heart, of course, you felt the empathy for that child. But it's really important to use the head as well to make sure that what you do is effective and well-directed. And not only that, but also I think reason helps us to understand that other people, wherever they are like us, that they can suffer as we can, that parents grieve for the deaths of their children as we do, and that just as our lives and our well-being matters to us, it matters just as much to all of these people. So I think reason is not just some neutral tool to help you get whatever you want, it does help us to put perspective on our situation. And I think that's why many of the most significant people in effective altruism have been people who've had backgrounds in philosophy or economics or math. And that might seem surprising because a lot of people think philosophy is remote from the real world. Economics, we're told, just makes us more selfish. And we know that math is for nerds. But in fact, it does make a difference. And in fact, there's one particular nerd who has been a particularly effective altruist.
I'm going to skip this effective altruist. Bill Gates, he's a billionaire and he does a lot of good, but I want us to think more about what we can do. So I'm going to skip this part and get to the real people.
That's fine if you're a billionaire, you can have that kind of impact. But if I'm not, what can I do? So I'm going to look at 4 questions that people ask that maybe stand in the way of them giving. They worry how much of a difference they can make, but you don't have to be a billionaire. This is Toby Ord. He's a research fellow in philosophy at the University of Oxford. He became an effective altruist when he calculated that with the money that he was likely to earn throughout his career, an academic career, he could give enough to cure 80,000 people of blindness in developing countries and still have enough left for a perfectly adequate standard of living. So Toby founded an organization called Giving What We Can to spread this information, to unite people who want to share some of their income and to ask people to pledge to give 10% of what they earn over their lifetime to fighting global poverty. Toby himself does better than that. He's pledged to live on £18,000 a year, that's less than $30,000, and to give the rest to those organisations. And yes, Toby is married and he does have a mortgage. This is a couple at a later stage of life. Charlie.
Why don't we all live like Toby Ord? What is it that's stopping us from doing this?
What about our problems?
Our problems. What problems do we have?
Like sometimes you may need to save some money for future medical issues.
Medical
Just in
issues.
case.
Yeah, just in case. We need some emergency money, right? There's uncertainty in the world. Maybe something will happen to us. Maybe Hong Kong government or the public hospitals can't take care of us. Perhaps we need some assistance or we need to hire some help in order to help ourselves or help a family member, right? So we have some uncertainty. Toby Ord is giving away some of this uncertainty. He has a mortgage, he has a life, but he doesn't save for this kind of emergency. Good. So uncertainty, maybe something unexpected is going to happen. What else is there?
Consumerism.
Consumerism. We have to have our Starbucks, right? We can't operate without it. When you say consumerism, what do you mean?
We feel like we are defined by the things that we own. When we're giving things out, it feels like we're sort of like losing our identity. We're losing what could have been the same resources that could have been used to make us feel better about who we are.
Right.
In comparison to what other people in
Yeah.
society.
So a lot of the value in which we see ourselves and the value that we actually do to others has to do with social status, their income, their ability to consume and show off their wealth. We know this very well in Hong Kong because people here do show off their wealth quite a lot, right? So if you've got your LV Gucci bag, that says something about you, right? How many lives can you save with one Gucci bag? Right. So it's a question, what do we give up when we give up the Starbucks or when we give up the LV Gucci bag, right? So we do have an association, and we study this in social psychology, between the stuff that we own, material possessions, and the value that we place on ourselves. Our salary, what is it that we signal to other people? Because we live in a social world. People are going to judge us, right? And if they see that we only have £18,000 a year, maybe they won't invite us to the party. Maybe we're going to be excluded from all sorts of other things. Very good. So we have uncertainty, and we have consumerism or value that we place on things. Anything else? Let's talk about Charlie and Diana.
Wrestler and Diana Schott, who when they were young, when they met, were activists against the Vietnam War, fought for social justice, and then moved into careers, as most people do, didn't really do anything very active about those values, although they didn't abandon them. And then as they got to the age at which many people start to think of retirement, they returned to them, and they've decided to cut back on their spending, to live modestly, and to give both money and time to helping to fight global poverty. Now, mentioning time might lead you to think, well, should I abandon my career and put all of my time into saving some of these 19,000 lives that are lost every day? One person who's thought quite a bit about this issue of how you can have a career that will have the biggest impact for good in the world is Will Crouch. He's a graduate student in philosophy. And he set up a website called 80,000 Hours, the number of hours he estimates most people spend on their career, to advise people on how to have the best, most effective career.
I was going to say about 80,000 hours, that in the last few years, the last session of advanced social psychology, I sit down with students in order to help them understand what kind of career they want to have, or what kind of impact they might want to have. So maybe it's very clear for you what your parents expect you. Maybe it's very clear to you why you signed up for an undergraduate in something related to psychology. But maybe you're not really sure about what kind of impact you want to have, what kind of psychologist you want to be, what kind of profession you want to be in, what kind of impact you want to have. So should I just maybe leave everything and go to South America to be close to that little girl in order to help out? Should I give up my career altogether? So the nice thing about 80,000 hours is that they give free consultation. So any one of you going to be a graduate in the Asian Ivy League University, HEU is up there on the top. They're very happy to talk to you about the kind of impact that you might want to have. So if you have any kind of considerations, it's completely free. They're happy to assist you, and they try to do this with scientific evidence and to help you to quantify. They don't have a right or wrong. They won't tell you, you must go for this. They will give you tools in order for you to do the work, in order to think about your careers. So just a little bit more about Will McCuskell. He was a postgrad here. Now he's a professor in Oxford. He has a lot of very important books that come out. One of them is about the future generations and thinking about long-termism, the long-term implications of everything. So very influential people, Toby Ord and Will McCuskell, are people who, after this TED Talk, became very influential, and their charities have a lot of good impact.
But you might be surprised to know that one of the careers that he encourages people to consider, if they have the right abilities and character, is to go into banking or finance. Why? Because if you earn a lot of money, you can give away a lot of money. And if you're successful in that career, you could give enough to an aid organisation so that it could employ, let's say, 5 aid workers in developing countries. And each one of them would probably do about as much good as you would have done. So you can quintuple the impact by leading that kind of career. Here's one young man who's taken this advice. His name is Matt Wager. He was a student at Princeton in philosophy and math. Actually won the prize for the best undergraduate philosophy thesis last year when he graduated. But he's gone into finance in New York. He's already earning enough so that he's giving a 6-figure sum to effective charities and still leaving himself with enough to live on. Matt has also helped me to set up an organisation that I'm working with that has the name taken from the title of a book I wrote, The Life You Can Save.
Another very influential charity started by somebody who was just like you, a student, studied philosophy or studied social psychology, studied all kinds of other psychologies, other kind of social sciences, and then made a decision that in order to increase the impact, he's going to go and use his talents in order to earn as much money as he can and give some of that. There's a very big foundation in effective altruism. They handle billions right now. It's called GiveWell. GiveWell was started by hedge fund managers that did very well on the stock market and earned hundreds of millions of dollars and wanted to give this away to charity. What is the problem with charity? They wanted to give the charity as effective as possible. But the problem is that they didn't know which charity to give this to. Some people said, give this to the Red Cross, or give this to Save a Child, give this to these kinds of charities. But they wanted to know, how do I quantify, how do I know with scientific evidence which is the best charity? So what did they do? They picked up the phone, called the charities, Red Cross. If I give you $1 million right now, I have it. I have $1 million. What are you going to do with it? And what's the charity's response? Try this with any charity in Hong Kong. Call them up and say, we have money to give you. I have $1,000. I calculated that as a student, I now have an extra $1,000. I want to give this to you. What are you going to do with it? Just like you said, just like was mentioned. They don't have the means to quantify the kind of good that they do. They say, no, trust us. We're the Red Cross. We know what we're doing. Save the child. Give this to us. Trust us. We're going to do good work. Effective altruism, GiveWell, Will McCaskill, Toby Owen say, no trust. We need openness, transparency, scientific evidence. We want to know exactly what happens with the $1,000 so that it's going to feel like we're actually there. We're going to know that the $1,000 doesn't go to the middleman. It doesn't go to some corrupt person. We want to know that it really goes to help a little girl. So they care about transparency. They care about metrics. So for the first time, effective altruism asks the question of how much does life cost? How can we improve lives? And not just the number of lives, but they also look at the quality of life. Can we increase the quality of life? So they're the first ones that ask questions like, can we quantify this? This is why you need philosophers, economists, sociologists, mathematicians, and social psychologists to sit down together to quantify this. So everything is about transparency. It's about scientific evidence. It's about opening up to a community to get as much feedback as possible in order to do more good and do good better. So these are the principles that these very inspiring young people, young students, had in order to improve the giving in the world. So to me, very inspirational. It keeps on going. I'm going to stop here, but I encourage you to go and listen to Peter Singer or read some of his books. This is a pledge, so they try to get as many people to take that pledge. Right now, there's 8,000 people that took the pledge to give 10% of their income. I have not done this yet. I hope to at some point. It's not mandatory for any of you to think about doing this or to do this, but I do want you to take some inspiration for people who are willing to do this. And even if you say, right now as a student, I can't do this, some of the pledges are, if I get to an income of this, then I will pledge 5%, 10%, how much? And then the question is, does this make any impact? And we'll see in future sessions about how much of an impact these individual contributions have. And the nice thing about effective altruism is that you'll get receipts and you'll see the entire process of what happens from the money that you received, the money that you sent, and the impact, the good that it did at the end. So the last part that I want to show you before we kind of end this class is this nice video. It's done by, I think, 80,000 Hours or one of the charities for effective altruism, just trying to ask people, how rich are you really? So when I ask you the question as students, how rich are you really? You tend to hesitate. Right now, I depend on my parents. I don't have a steady income, but there are all kinds of different tools to calculate your impact or how rich you are. So I'll just show you one of these tools. So for example, how rich am I? So we'll just open this. So the way that I calculated this is that I went to the HKU website to see how much does an HKU graduate make, expected to make on average. Obviously in psychology, we'll maybe earn a little bit less than the people in the business school, not on the high side of this average, but on average, we would say like 20,000 Hong Kong dollars. And of course, this is likely to increase with time, with experience and so forth. So what I did over here is that I basically said, I want to see what happens for a graduate. If we look at the annual income, taxes are quite low in Hong Kong. And of course, if you're on the bracket of 20,000 a month, then your taxes are going to be even lower than that, like 5% and all that. We don't need this. Hello. Yeah. So I just put here 240,000 annual income in Hong Kong dollars. Let's say that you're a single adult, so you don't have anybody else to take care of. Of course, you can adjust this in any way that you like. So how are you compared to other people in the world? So you can see that not compared to other people in Hong Kong. You know, other people in Hong Kong, you might be a lot less than average, but compared to the rest of the world, this already puts you on the top 3% of earners in the world. Obviously, we need to compare it to where you live because you have expenses. Rent in Hong Kong is very expensive. I don't know if you can find something decent and still have a lot to spare. But let's assume that we're comparing things on a global level. Maybe you have access to public housing. Maybe you live with your parents. I don't know. But putting all rent and expenses aside, this already puts you on the top 3%. And if you look at your income and the median person's income around the world, so this is already a lot. Just by the fact that we live in Hong Kong, we're doing a lot better than most of the people in the world. So your income is 12.1 times more than the global median. And then you can calculate what would happen if you would give 5% or 10% or 15%. Just play with this as a game in order to see what that would mean. And then you can look at that money. You don't have to do this right now. You can do this as a pledge for later in life, and then see what kind of impact, how many lives you can save based on what. So I'll just give you one example. One of the top charities in effective altruism is called Against Malaria Foundation, the one that Peter Singer talked about. What's nice about this and why this is so effective is because one mosquito net, which protects a family living in a tent or living in a shack, a mosquito net costs something like $2. So let's say 20 Hong Kong dollars. And this lasts for about 3 years. So if you can protect a family with 20 Hong Kong dollars for 3 years against mosquitoes, against malaria, decreasing their likelihood of getting malaria, then that's already a lot of impact. So you can think about how many, in one Starbucks, I can give one mosquito net to one family in a place where malaria is a big issue. So there's lots of calculations like this. And what's nice about effective altruism, it at least gets you to think about these things, that you can play with these kind of things in order to understand what kind of impact you can do. Or at very least, if you graduate and you work for a nonprofit, you work for government, you work for a for-profit, you can see the kind of impact that you can do within this kind of organization. So the last 10 minutes, I'm just going to show you this interesting video of how rich are you really. So what they do is they go around in a park in London, and then they ask people how rich they think they are compared to what happens in reality. And I just want you to see the kind of reactions about the shock of people who think that they're not very well off because it's very difficult to live in London, almost as difficult as it is to live in Hong Kong, but then realizing that they're actually pretty well off compared to other people in the world. So sometimes we forget how good we have it in Hong Kong. Things are pretty standard, especially if we go to a place like HKU, and we have good public infrastructure, so the hospitals and everything else. But not everybody in the world has that. So it's a good reminder.
Do you think that people who are well off should be giving to charity?
Everyone could. I probably could more than I do, which is not very much at all. Only 30% is.
So the top 30% should be giving to charity. Do you have a sense of how well off you might be compared to the rest of the world?
But the whole world.
The whole world. No, don't Google it. Just give me a guess, and then because we're about to look it up. So you think somewhere in the top half, maybe?
Maybe.
Okay. Well, let's find out. Do you want to chuck in your income there?
Is this for the whole year?
Yeah, annual, yeah.
Okay.
And then just press calculate. All right, Tilly.
Oh my God.
Today we are on the streets of London trying to interview some people about their giving, about charity, and about how rich they really are compared to the rest of the world. Do you give to charity?
I do.
Not often, no, sometimes.
People had a lot of different reasons for giving.
I'm Muslim, so we do believe that is one of our moral obligations that we do have to give back.
I tend to do a lot of my giving in my local community.
Build something that I can actually take back over to where I'm from.
Most people agreed that the well-off should give.
Well, of course.
But exactly what proportion of people should give was debated.
I would like to say the top 30%. I mean, I'm a primary school teacher, I'm a fairly low earner, but I am giving to charity every month.
I don't think there's any one standard to say, okay, you come here, this is when you have to do it.
And people were pretty unsure about where they stacked up.
What percentage I fall into?
Yeah.
The majority, which is not rich.
Do we think maybe top 20%, something like that?
No.
But here's the counterintuitive thing. On a global scale, most of us are much richer than we think.
Really? In the whole world?
Do you want to read
you are in the richest 1.5% of the global population. That's mental.
You're in the top, richest 1%. You're still in the top 20%, at least the top 20%. You're in the richest.
I'm so rich. I'm in the top 2.5%.
Top 15% richest people in the world. You're in the top richest 1.5% of the world. How do you feel about that?
You know, it's funny when you think about it. In reality, I wouldn't think that.
Most people wouldn't. In fact, some people found it pretty hard to hear.
I don't know how to feel about that. Does it have any problem in calculator?
No, I mean, no,
it's good,
it works. Like the average person in the UK is really in the top richest few percent of the world.
It's kind of funny when you think about how much argument there is about the 1%.
That's crazy.
So what's going on here? We asked an economist for help. And why are you surprised?
I don't see it. Because when you're fighting to do this and that, and then now you tell me I'm a rich man, big surprise.
Yeah.
So he says, you're telling me I'm a rich man. Well, I don't know. It depends on your definition of rich. It doesn't mean you're rich in the sense that that person had previously been thinking of the word rich. It means maybe there's just classes of poor or relative poverty that they didn't understand.
This is Julian Jameson. He's a health economist. We made him do the calculator too.
Yep, so top 1%. Sounds about right.
You're not surprised?
No, I'm not surprised. It would be a bad sign for me in my research career if I were too surprised by something like that.
We know a bunch of these other people who seem to have very wealthy lives. The life that we've got, that can't be the pinnacle, right? There's got to be 20% of other people who have more. And then it is quite shocking to be brought back to earth and be actually really no.
She's one of the people that you can meet if you get the advice from 80,000 Hours. So she's one of the advisors over there. Very interesting talks, TED Talks, and so forth in effective altruism. It's really interesting to hear these kinds of discussions. The Economist, by the way, we're going to talk about a lot of findings from economics. If we give cash directly to people who need it, they tend to do pretty well with it. So the revolutionary idea is that if we're afraid of the middleman, if we're afraid of all corrupted people that will take the money in between the people who give and the people who actually use it, perhaps we can cut off the middleman and give people directly. So we find people who are in need, who are verified that they have a need, and we send them directly to their mobiles to use for this as they like. And what was nice is that the economists that received the Nobel Prize ran a randomized control trial where they compared randomly assigned people to randomly receive cash money, or have somebody coming from the West, developed countries, to come and say, no, we think those developing countries people need this, therefore we must decide for them. Or people who receive all sorts of Red Cross charities and all of that. And they showed that giving people cash directly actually works. So all the fears about them using this for booze or for drugs or for just wasting this on gambling, all of this did not happen. And actually people know best what is it that they need, and they're pretty clever about this. So if you give them the money directly, they will use this in order to better their lives. So a revolutionary idea, how is it used in effective altruism? Actually, Give Directly, which is a charity, is the benchmark. So whenever we try and build a new charity, we compare this to the benchmark of Give Directly. So for example, Against Malaria Foundation with mosquito nets is about 10 times more effective than Give Directly. So we try to benchmark everything, we try to quantify everything, and we run randomized controlled trials in developing countries, in Africa, in South America, in order to see that the kind of charity that we build is really much better than just giving people cash directly in order for them to do something with it. So we're going to talk about all these things. Last semester, the students, their second task, after we ran this experiment together of how to compare charities, they had to build a charity. So they designed a charity together. This semester, we're going to do something a little bit different, but we are going to use scientific evidence in order to try and do the most good, in order to help all kinds of charities, help effective altruism, help people who want to do more good to really do that. Okay, so I hope I got you interested in this. We're going to talk a lot more about all of these topics and using social psychology, economics, and experiments in order to do more good and do good better.